Hello and welcome to Climate Finance, Aligning Your Financial Goals with Climate Impact, a panel hosted by GreenPortfolio in partnership with E2 Environmental Entrepreneurs, a partner of the NRDC. My name is Bonnie Gurry, and I'm a co-founder of GreenPortfolio, where we're on a mission to make it easier for everyone to use the power of their finances to fight climate change. I focus my career on clean energy, but have often been frustrated when trying to get my money to match my values. That's one reason my co-founder, Elizabeth Landau, and I started GreenPortfolio, the personal finance platform that helps you manage your money the climate-friendly way, making it easy to understand the climate impact of your finances and meet your financial goals. With October being Energy Awareness Month, we wanted to bring together leaders in the climate finance industry to talk about our new climate reality. Taking mass transit, eating less meat, improving the efficiency of your home are all ways you may have tried to take climate action. But did you know that your financial decisions and money have the power to fight climate change? Where you bank and how you invest can be your most impactful way to make a positive impact. In this virtual panel discussion, you'll learn how to get started and what your options are for managing your money to meet both your financial and climate goals. Today's panel is presented in partnership with E2, and I have the pleasure of co-hosting with Uchenna Bright, Northeast Advocate at E2. Uchenna, could you give us a brief introduction to yourself and E2?
Yeah, thank you, Bonnie, and thank you everyone for joining us today. Like Bonnie said, I'm going to quickly introduce myself and E2, and then we can move straight to introducing the panel and the program. My name is Uchenna Bright, as Bonnie said, the Northeast Advocate at Environmental Entrepreneurs, or E2. And E2 is a national, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization comprised of business leaders who are our E2 members. And E2 is a platform for our business leaders, so executives, business owners, investors, or farmers. We are a platform for business leaders and our business leader membership to advocate for and promote strong environmental policy that is good for the economy and good for the environment. Now, we affirm that they are good for the economy because strong environmental policies help grow a sustainable economy, reducing risk, increasing market certainty, and also helping to create good paying, high quality, and very localized jobs. At E2, we have a membership of over 11,000 business leaders across the country and who work or do business in every state in the country and across industries and sectors. And they advocate with us in a variety of ways. But central to our advocacy is that E2 business leaders understand that having a healthy environment is an economic imperative. It's no exaggeration to say that we are in the middle of a climate and environmental crisis. Destructive weather events accelerated by climate change cost us more and more every year. According to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, which is a scientific agency within the Department of Commerce, in the 2000s, the average annual cost of climate change was $54 billion. In the 2010s, that average cost went up to about $85 billion. And last year alone, we had $99 billion in climate-related disasters. And we're already on track this year to break that record. So in so many ways, we cannot afford to continue on this trend. It damages every aspect of our economic health. And then on the flip side of that, there's also so much economic opportunity, prosperity, and long-term gain to be had from embracing and advancing a clean economy. Businesses and individuals alike benefit, but it's really important to understand our options. And at E2, we work to enact policies, and governments take time. And as individuals, we can make decisions to take immediate steps on a host of climate action activities, as Bonnie just mentioned. But possibly one of the most important steps we can take is to understand our financial impact. Where we put our money actually has the power to fight climate change. Where we invest our money has the power to have a positive impact on the world. So today we will be discussing options for making that positive impact by aligning finances and investments with climate on the conscience. So with that, I want to go ahead and introduce our panel for today's discussion. On our panel today, we have Zach Stein with Carbon Collective. Zach is the co-founder of Carbon Collective. He oversees the creation of Carbon Collective's Climate Index, over 100 investments that are aligned to solve climate change. He is passionate about educating people on how being a smart investor helps solve climate change. And he lives in the San Francisco Bay Area with his wife and is expecting his first son this year. Carbon Collective, which is the company Zach co-founded, is the first online investment advisor 100% focused on climate change. They help you invest your savings, whether they be for retirement or more near-term goal like buying a house, into diversified, low-fee, climate-focused portfolios. Our next panelist is Matt Maroney with Raise Green. Matt is the COO and co-founder of Raise Green. He is a data scientist with 10 plus years of experience in environmental remediation, permitting, and sustainability strategy. He has a bachelor's of environmental science from Western Washington University and a master's of environmental management from Yale University. Now, Raise Green is the climate tech marketplace for local impact investing, licensed with the SEC to sell private securities. They provide communities with the tools they need to create, finance, build, and run their own climate energy projects or climate solution companies. Raise Green gives anyone the ability to invest directly in a climate action project with a chance to earn a return on their investment. Our final panelist to introduce, last but not least, Blake Jones with Clean Energy Credit Union. And Blake is a self-described clean energy geek and cooperative geek. He is the co-founder of 4 cooperatives: Clean Energy Credit Union, as I mentioned, Namaste Solar, Amicus Solar Cooperative, and Kachua Impact Fund. Blake is a 2010 Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year award recipient and has a BE in civil engineering from Vanderbilt University. Clean Energy Credit Union envisions a world where everyone can participate in the clean energy movement. CECU is a financial institution solely focused on providing customized loans that reduce the cost of clean energy products and services for individuals who seek to make a positive impact on the world. Now, as a nonprofit, tax-exempt cooperative, Clean Energy Credit Union is democratically owned and controlled by its members on a 1 vote per member basis. So I want to welcome all the panelists, and now I will pass it back over to Bonnie to begin the discussion.
Thank you so much, Uchenna. We really appreciate having E2 hosting this with us today, and the work you guys do is really pivotal for moving the entire industry forward. Just a little bit of housekeeping. If you have questions, you can submit them to the panel using the live chat to the right of the live stream feed. You just have to make sure you're logged into your YouTube or Google account. If you don't have a YouTube or Google account, you can email your questions to marketing@greenportfolio.com. We're keeping an eye on that, and we'll try to bring all the questions at the end of this panel discussion. And lastly, one final thing before we begin, we need to remind everyone that this panel is for informational purposes only. It is not applied to your personal financial situation, so this is just educational. So let's get started. For a lot of people, it can feel overwhelming when they think of everything we need to do to fight climate change to actually start to move the needle. Just a simple question: how can people utilize their finances to help mitigate that change? Let's see, who should I pick on? Matt, do you have any insight on this?
Yeah, sure. I'll break the ice here. Look, there are millions of people marching in the streets for social and environmental justice, but what do you do at the end of the march, right? Do you write a letter to your congresswoman asking her to support a Green New Deal? Good luck getting anything passed in Congress anytime this decade. Do you write a letter to the board of directors at Exxon telling them to stop polluting? Good luck with their quarterly profit expectations. So, we have to take matters into our own hands, and we can, especially when we pressure our friends, our family, to actually vote their conscience, not just at the ballot box, but with every decision they make in commerce.
Yeah, I'll add to that. Your finances are one of those things that you only have to do once. I think for so many people, it can feel overwhelming with when it comes to climate change. You're like, oh, like I'm in the grocery store. Is this plant-based? Like what's in this? Where is this coming from? There's so much decision fatigue, and all of this is really important. And so what we like to think about is how do you make those big one-time decisions where you don't have to think about it again? It's just, how you bank. You now work with a clean energy credit union. It's how you invest with Raise Green and somewhere like Carbon Collective. And then that's it. You get to go on and keep living your life. And those are actually some of the most impactful decisions that we can have as individuals, like how we drive, how we power our homes, and things like that. So I kind of like to think about it, and we at Carbon Collective, of in that category, finances is one of those things you can pick up, do, and then put down.
Totally agree. It's something that most people don't have to go and reset up their bank account every month, right? So making that very thoughtful, purposeful decision can get the ball rolling and doesn't require you to constantly have to update and change and make decisions. But just thinking about that, like, what role do you see financial institutions taking in fighting climate change? Is this really their problem? Should they really be part of this?
I'll take that one. Yes, they have a responsibility to participate in this as well. And I think one of the easiest things that financial institutions can do is divest from investing in fossil fuels. And what's great is you're already seeing some financial institutions do that, but not enough. We need to keep pressuring and asking for them to do so. So I think it's great. And I know we were just talking about individuals, and I completely agree that it's great when you can do the big things, but there are some people who do have the wherewithal and or the time. Maybe they don't have kids yet, bad joke, but they have the time to do some of the little things. And I want to believe that, like Harvard University, which has the largest endowment of any university in the United States, them choosing to divest from fossil fuels probably had a lot to do with not just the students asking for it, but also alumni. So if you do have an alma mater, when they do ask you to donate before you send that check, I think if you're even considering doing so, you can at the very least put in a note saying, not going to donate this year, not going to donate very much until you divest our endowment from fossil fuels. So financial institutions definitely can do that. I think that when you look at banks, it is amazing to see still how many billions of dollars are still being lent to the fossil fuel industry, and that needs to stop as well. So you do see some banks in particular starting to make commitments to not lend to fossil fuels. You see investment fund managers, saying, "Hey, we want to divest." There are a growing number of ETFs and financial advisors who are making those types of commitments, but we need to keep that up. And then not just doing the, divest from fossil fuels, it's also making the targeted investments like what Carbon Collective is doing, saying, hey, we're investing in things that are having a positive impact or helping to move climate finance, move the ball forward down the field. So yeah, those are just some examples of what financial institutions can do, but they'll do more of it if they get pressure from us, their customers, their investors, their clients, their alumni to do so.
Yeah, and I think it's just good business. Businesses don't exist in a vacuum; they exist on the planet. So any company that doesn't acknowledge, plan, and mitigate climate change will actually disappear this century. So, I mean, every single financial institution, every single business needs to actually take this seriously if they want to survive in this century's economy.
And the point I would add to that is that climate change is an interesting issue in that, we actually can solve it. It's physics at the end of the day. And what's missing is investment. We have to grow our way out of solving climate change. All of these industries that are young and building, like clean energy, electric cars, things like that, cell-based meats, they are growing, and that is actually what we need to replace to kind of maintain what we have in our level of civilization today. And so right now, globally, we're investing about $500 billion into climate solutions broadly, according to Project Drawdown. And in order to be on a path to avoiding catastrophic warming, so between 1.5, remaining below 2 degrees, we need to be investing more like $5,000 billion dollars a year in climate solutions. And I think we'll probably talk about this more, but we're at what's also really cool about this time that we're in, and that it's not charity. The economics of a lot of these investments are on their side and for their rapid growth.
I think that's absolutely true. And I think it's really empowering and overwhelming on one hand to hear the gap, like where are we at? But then also empowering to know, no, we've actually measured this, we know where we need to be, and we actually know the solutions to get there. It's a matter of taking the action and figuring out how we're going to make it happen. So one thing I wanted to touch base on was there's a lot of talk right now about ESG investing. So environmental, social, governance investing. I'm not sure how familiar everyone is on the call about this, but it's really a trend right now that you can invest in these funds that have, that say, if you invest in this fund, it is meeting a certain guidelines for environmental, social, and governance standards. But how is that different from impact investing? A lot of people think that they are the same. So do you guys want to take a stab at how they're different and why that matters?
Yeah, I mean, I'll go first on this one. I think it's funny, ESG has only been around seriously for maybe 10 years. But I mean, all of a sudden on LinkedIn, I see all the financial people are 30-year experts in ESG, which I find very funny. ESG is basically, can you afford to fill out the surveys from the certifiers? It's kind of like the same thing that happened with organic and how a lot of small farmers got left out. I think impact investing are the people that can't afford to fill out the certifications to be called an ESG company. This is a well-known property in all types of systems. It's called success to the successful, where the people that can pay win. And that's why you see so many of the largest companies leading the largest ESG ETFs.
Yeah, and I think adding to this is a space that we've looked at a lot. When we started building our climate-focused portfolios at Carbon Collective, we really pulled back the hood on ESG because we saw that this was something that our friends and people in our networks, that they had done the same thing, and they had come away saying exactly this, where is the impact in that? And so basically how ESG works, of what Matt was saying, is you have these analytics companies that will go out and they will rate a company based upon 100 metrics within E, environmental, 100 within S, social, and 100 within G, governance. And then they'll average all those 100 together in each column and then average that score together. So on the one hand, ESG is it is a way of acknowledging that ethics is complicated. And what different people care about is complicated. And so it's a way of trying to account for all of that complexity and put it all together into something that's a single score. The problem with it is that you're diluting from the things that you could really care about, and that you actually don't have any insight into that score. There's 8 different ratings companies, and they don't correlate with each other. And so you have to know I prefer Sustainalytics methods over MSCI's, but they don't have you can't see it because it's all proprietary data. So it's all behind paywalls, as Matt was saying. And so there's no transparency there. And so I think a lot of people, when they think they have ESG investing, they're going, oh, there's impact here. I'm holding the companies that are building a solution. Maybe I'm voting with the companies to pressure those to have more solutions. I'm fully divesting from the companies that are doing bad things. But the fine print is usually neither of those. So ESG portfolios, what we tend to see is you get a less bad version of the stock market. It is by no means a good one, and you're paying about double to triple than you would otherwise.
I'll attempt to provide a supplemental perspective on this. The way I had always thought of it was the kind of movement started with socially responsible investing many decades ago. And that was primarily applying what they call negative screens. So let's prevent from investing in the bad stuff like tobacco companies or alcohol companies or things that people wanted to negatively screen out. Then ESG is what's already been described, but that could result in negative screens, or it could result in doing some things that have some positive impact. It could be either or. Whereas impact investing is explicitly investing in things that have a quantifiable positive impact. So there is some overlap there, and sometimes you can be talking about the same thing, but that's often the spectrum that I've thought of those three as.
Yeah, that's really a wonderful portrait, Blake. I do want to hammer. I mean, Zach, you were hitting some wonderful points there, which is that all of these ratings are proprietary. So it's like, imagine if you're 10K filing for a public company, if the GAAP accounting method was private and proprietary. I think it's very important to remember that if you don't like one ESG score, you can just hire a different company, and the same company may score 20 or 90. So it's really easy to game the system. And so I would be exceptionally skeptical of ESG ratings in general. And this is well reflected and well reported on by Bloomberg, especially, and the larger academic study of ESG as a whole.
But something that's fun about the three organizations that we represent is that they're at that positive impact end of the spectrum. You invest in Carbon Collective's portfolio. It's going to be in companies that are doing positive things, having a positive impact. Raise Green, you pick a solar project you want to invest in. It's a solar project. It's generating clean solar electricity. You're investing in something that's doing positive. With Clean Energy Credit Union, you deposit your money in a checking account with us, and you know that your dollars are only used to provide a loan to help somebody else put solar panels on their roof or get a high efficiency heat pump or something like that. It's only going to be used for an energy saving or clean energy project. So those are some concrete examples of ways that your money is going to be put to use for positive impact.
Before we leave this ESG topic, I just wanted to touch base a bit about this trend that we're seeing lately of ETFs doing a rebranding and calling themselves ESG when they weren't ESG just a few years previous, and often increasing their fee. So I was just curious if you guys are seeing this as a trend that's slowing down. What are you seeing in your purview lately?
I'll take the start of this because I was so shocked to learn. I was like, I'm gonna get an ESG. I'm in. And I was like, okay, moving it out of this Vanguard ETF, moving it into Vanguard ESG ETF. The top 5 holdings were exactly the same. So you peel back the hood, is investing in Microsoft and Facebook good for the environment? Kind of give me a break. Tell me that those millions of people marching are okay with that. And I think it's just a matter of time until people realize that, largely these ETFs are a farce. And the ones that aren't, may charge 3, 4, maybe even 10 times what a traditional ETF does. So be skeptical, take a look at the top 10 holdings and see if it's the impact you actually want, because it wasn't the one I wanted.
Yeah, I think that this is where, to hype you, Bonnie, a little bit, a place like GreenPortfolio, there is not transparency, and there's just a lot of greenwashing out there with it. It's playing on our emotions. We are so scared about climate change. And so there's so much money to be made from trying to say we're tapping into that. And so how do you then find kind of a trusted source within this? And that's part of my struggle with ESG, is that you're either directing money that has intention of being an impact, and so it's having little impact, or you're actually causing people to kind of become nihilistic and skeptical about the ways that their finances can be used to drive change in this sphere. So we need GreenPortfolio to dig in as much as possible. It allow those of us, coming on the outside to be able to see okay, this is exactly what's in here. In terms of the ETFs that are rising and rebranding, yeah, it's easy to cut out some oil stocks, and you're still holding big tech stocks. They tend to do pretty well, part of the ESG boom, and why it's done well. It's been an influx of capital, but also it's just they've overweighting tech more. And is that a problem? I don't necessarily say one way or another, but it just is. And so, yeah, I think especially when you look at BlackRock and Wealthfront, they just released their socially responsible investing funds, and it's still 4% fossil fuel companies in it. It's how? And there's no additional investment in the companies building solutions to our world's largest problems. That's where I start to really scratch my head.
Well, hey, look, Zach, it's high efficiency natural gas, right? So there you go. I mean, but the truth is we really can't build any new fossil fuel infrastructure at all. And the data is conclusive that all of the existing and planned power plants in the world will already make us not hit 1.5. So not only do we have to not invest in fossil fuel, but we actually have to close down a lot of them and cancel the construction of a lot of them. And, you know, coming from the wacky world of project finance, I mean, there's a lot of people that are going to be really unhappy that took out 10, 15-year term loans that will default. And, you know, it's going... And when I see fossil fuels in an ETF, I mean, just come on. It's just a joke. It's just a joke.
I would say that this is also kind of, to your point, part of some of the investment risk of holding the creditors for these projects, and not just fossil fuel companies themselves, but also these major utilities, especially ones that can't just pass it along to the ratepayer, where solar and wind in particular, they're just the cheapest form of energy. It is now cheaper to, if you could build a coal plant for $0, it still would be a better financial decision to put in solar and wind broadly, which is pretty impressive.
Yeah, amazing change has happened in the renewable energy industry in the last 10 years, which I think a lot of people aren't fully aware of, how drastically the economics of solar and wind have changed and change the economics of what we need to do to go forward to actually start to make a dent into this huge problem we're facing. Which brings me to the next question I have, which is, you know, people say, oh, this sounds, you know, very nice and good. I love the environment. That's great. But what about my financial returns? You know, I still have to retire. I still have to put my kids through college. You know, how do they mitigate this risk? Or, you know, what can we tell them about investing with a climate positive focus? How worried should they be?
Happy to take this one first. Blake, I also saw that you unmuted yourself in the last one, so I want to make sure you get a chance. So this is a question that we get a lot. And look, let's just be pragmatic. When it comes to your IRA, your primary goal with that is not climate impact. Your primary goal with that is to retire. That's your primary goal. And so if as an investor or as an investment manager, if you fail to meet that goal, it's not diversified, it's really expensive, then it's just, you're not going to get very much capital moving into climate solutions. So that's the mode that we were taking in building our portfolios at Carbon Collective. I think taking a step back from that broadly, the narrative that we're seeing is that there is starting to be more consensus that taking a climate aligned approach to investing will generate alpha, meaning that it could outperform the market over the next 40 years. A fund manager for the California Teachers Pension Fund has said this, and that they're aligning more of their investments. They said that last week. So basically, I can share how we build our portfolios and our back testing of that. We remove the companies that are dependent upon the long-term use of fossil fuels for their core business. It's about 20% of the stock market. We give their share to the companies building climate solutions, so we overweight them, and then broadly hold the rest of those companies, because these are the companies that could go either way. They could switch to 100% green energy, 100% electric fleet. Today, they often aren't, without changing their core business. That's a really important piece. It's just changing how their business is powered, how their business is transported. So for us, that's where we want to apply our shareholder advocacy to get these businesses to transition as quickly as possible. So in terms of performance and back testing that, this strategy tracked the market quite closely from 2015 to 2020. And then in 2020, pretty significantly outperformed it, but has resumed tracking it in 2021.
As someone that runs a financial institution, I can't talk about risk and return, but I would say, Blake has seen a lot of change in the renewable energy. I mean, the Amicus Cooperative is pretty amazing organizations, and I'd love to hear what the experience of you and your members have been in terms of ROI on their work over the last decade.
Yeah, I generally find this this overall subject to be fascinating. There are a lot of high impact investors or investors seeking high impact that do question the idea of, can you have your cake and eat it too? Can you have really high impact and also make, extraordinary returns? And there are lots of people who believe that absolutely that's possible. I think in general, yes, absolutely it's possible, and seeing great returns in clean energy sector investments in general. But I also think that it's interesting to think about risk. Like if you're not taking into account climate risk in the investment decisions that you make, especially if you're an investment manager or a fund manager, I don't see how you can do that given the catastrophic consequences that could happen, or even the minor consequences that could just erode your return over time. For example, if you're investing in a real estate investment trust and that REIT is investing in new commercial real estate in downtown Miami and wanting to hold those properties for the long term, and they're not taking into account the possibility of rising sea levels and what that could do to a city like Miami, I think that would, that there's a question about the fiduciary duty, and are they really responsible stewards of the money that they're managing. So yeah, it's a fascinating subject. I absolutely think it's possible to get normal returns and possibly higher returns, depending on what you're talking about. But let me give one example with Clean Energy Credit Union. People need to bank somewhere. Right now, interest rates are low, so you're not going to earn a lot in your checking account or your money market account or with a CD anyway. But if you're invested in JP Morgan Chase is one of the largest lenders to the fossil fuel industry right now. And JP Morgan Chase also has one of the lowest interest rates that they pay on their checking accounts and their savings accounts. You could take your money out of that checking account, savings account, and put it into Clean Energy Credit Union or Amalgamated Bank or Self-Help Credit Union or Beneficial State Bank, where it's going to have much higher impact and still be earning higher interest rates than you would if you're banking at JP Morgan Chase or Wells Fargo or Bank of America. Take your pick on the big banks. So Clean Energy Credit Union, we intentionally design our interest rates to be above the national average. So I think that is just an easy example of getting your cake and eat it too. It's going to have the high impact of only supporting clean energy and energy saving projects, and you're going to get higher interest rates than you would get anywhere else there. That's a fun example.
Mm-hmm.
I think that this comes to a point that I think we all align on, which is asking people to sacrifice when it comes to climate change. At least, in Western civilizations, in the US, it just doesn't work. And so you have to be just as good as the non-impact alternative plus impact. And so Blake, Clean Energy Credit Union, you get better. It's actually a better bank. Like you make more money, and it happens to also that your money's not going to fossil fuels and building the infrastructure that we need. Like that's awesome. And we just need to see more of it.
I'd love to build on what Blake was just talking about. And talk a little bit about how consumers can learn more about the impact their financial decisions have on climate change. So Blake just gave a great example of how your money, when it's sitting in a checking account, is actually off doing other things, funding things you may not want it to be funding. So can you guys give a little more color about other ways consumers' financial decisions are actually impacting climate change, or either negatively or positively?
I mean, I can talk about, we've had over 560 investments through our platform now into a variety of energy efficiency, solar, and clean energy ventures. None of these would have happened without the investments that these people made. So if you want to talk about impact is additionality. So, I mean, there's a lot of, if we want to just talk solar, right? Biden just said 50% solar in the US by 2050. We're at 4%, right? So, how many projects on schools, community centers, churches are not happening right now because the private equity funds, I literally had a guy tell me, I don't even get out of bed for anything less than $1 million. And it's like, I think a lot of people would be really upset. If they could help their church save 20, 30% on their electricity bills, and then their church is paying them, that's a really beautiful model that I think is, pretty damn all-American, self-resilient. And we need to talk additionality, because if we're just talking about moving capital from one pool to another pool, you're going to end up with a system where maybe we get to 100% net zero. But if it's just the same players owning all of the assets, the sustainable solution won't be sustainable, because income inequality will actually cause geopolitical instability and rock that solution state. So we really need to think about additionality and making sure that people can actually capture this alpha that Zach's talking about. I mean, just draw a line in the sand, look at the top 15 solar companies and look at the top 15 oil companies and watch it for the next 5 years. I mean, see which ones grow faster, because almost everyone is pulling all of their money out of fossil fuels. And, these companies, unless they switch, are going to just really kind of plateau. And so if you are thinking about retirement somewhere around 2050, you want to be in solar and not not fossil fuels. And that's not investment advice, by the way.
Noted.
I'm
sorry, did you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I just, the way I personally have thought about it is there's kind of 4 main quadrants that I think about with my money, and I think my money is going to have an impact somewhere on that spectrum. It's either going to be doing harm, it's either going to be having positive impact, or somewhere in between. And we think a lot of people think about where they invest their money. Of course, you want to do that very, very conscientiously, like we're talking about. But there's also, where do you spend your money? So being a conscious consumer, buying local. Are you supporting fair trade or organic or certified B corporations? Those things really make a difference. So voting with your dollars, I think a lot of people are aware of that, but as a conscious consumer, it's big. And then now, especially millennials are thinking about where they earn their money, in terms of their labor, their time and energy. There are a lot of people who don't just want to earn a paycheck. They want to earn a paycheck from a company that's doing good in the world. And I think it's great to see that people are wanting more purposeful careers. And then I think the last frontier that not as many people have thought about is, where does your money spend the night? Like you were saying earlier, Bonnie, when you've got it in a checking account, savings account, money market account, it's doing something. It's being put to work. But not many people are aware of that, as aware as they are of the other 3 quadrants that I just mentioned. So where you bank, where you keep your money, absolutely does have an impact. And thinking about those 4 things on a regular basis, at the very least, growing your awareness for what the dollars are doing that you're involved with. It's very important, I think.
I think that this also speaks to, like, what you were talking about, is something that was really insightful for me, is realizing, like, our statistical models in our brains as individuals of how individual action creates change is, like, usually wrong. We kind of think like, oh, I buy the Impossible Burger instead of the meat burger, and that one action like leads to impact. And it's like, no, like, let's be honest, the likelihood of that one action leading to significant impact is actually pretty low, like that impacting the whole supply chain. But when it does lead to impact, that impact is potentially very high. We need to multiply that together. So an example is, like, let's say you're at a grocery store and the grocery store manager orders chickens in batches of 1,000. And so the time that you not buying that chicken meant that that grocery store sold 4,999 chickens and not 5,000 that week. That one action was incredibly impactful. And so that's a way of thinking. There's almost like a faith of, like, you don't know by not buying that airplane ticket if that's going to be the last seat that the airline says, all right, we're shutting down this route. There is some line with it. And so it's a step function. It is not linear in terms of how individual action.
That's a similar argument of, does my vote count? Out of this many millions of votes, does it count? But I believe you still need to vote. You have to have that faith that you're talking about, Zach. So yes, this buying the Impossible Burger this one time, is that going to make much of a difference? Well, if you're holistically thinking about all the times that you might be able to buy a holistic burger, plus all the other actions that you might make, plus all the other actions that other people are making, then absolutely it's going to add up.
Yeah, I think this is a really fascinating discussion as a nerdy recovering scientist. I had a good friend who told me, hey, Matt, I make an impact. I unplug my phone charger every night. And I said, that's awesome, right? But the amount of energy you save in a year is less than driving in your car for 1 second. So, like, you need to actually put this stuff in perspective and focus on the highest impact first. So, investing in solar is great if you care about carbon reductions in some places, right? If the grid's already pretty clean, like in Washington State, that additional carbon reduction you're going to get is not as impactful as perhaps building it somewhere else. And I would add, I think, climate finance is very interesting, but there's a lot of other environmental endpoints that are arguably much more important in the short term. Things like air pollution, things like persistent organic pollutants and biodiversity loss, which is addressed by some of those consumer choices. To Zach and Blake's points, buying fair trade, not getting on that airplane, like it could tip the scale, and at some point it will. So we all just need to aggregate those choices as often as possible. And I think we really need to leverage shame as a very powerful motivator to our friends and families. And I think part of the reason you're seeing this massive growth in ESG is because, the boomers have been berated by their millennial children about the climate impact, and they control most of the wealth in this country. So, them getting shamed by their kids is actually starting to have a really big impact. So don't underestimate the social pressure as well as the daily choices that we can make.
So just to keep the conversation going, one thing we think about a lot at GreenPortfolio is how can we make climate finance, which is in some ways a fairly new industry, as inclusive as possible. Traditionally, finance and energy we're not welcoming or built for women, people of color, people with disabilities. So how can we make this new industry, which we're all kind of a part of, as inclusive as possible? How do we start this industry on the right foot? We think we need everyone on board with fixing climate change. We can't leave out huge swaths of the population, not only because they're an important part of the solution, but also because it's not fair if not everyone is able to get on board with what will be hopefully our new, climate future, which is built on cleaner industries, cleaner forms of energy. So how do we do this? How do we get started on making this an inclusive industry?
I'll take a crack at this, but I'll be the first to say that I get served a healthy dose of humble pie every week or every day on this topic. I don't have all the solutions or even many of the solutions. I have a ton to learn, but I've a few things that I've learned in my own experience that have been helpful. I co-manage an investment cooperative. And that investment cooperative, very grateful that out of the 5 board directors, who we also double as the investment committee, 3 of us are women and 3 of us are people of color. That's very important that in the room where it happens, so to speak, from the Hamilton musical, we've got to have more women, we've got to have more people of color in the room where it happens, making the decisions, being on the board, being on the investment committee, being in the committee or the steering committee or whatever the case may be, to make sure that they're involved and they're providing the diversity of perspectives and opinions that are required to make better and better decisions. So our investment cooperative, we've been intentionally, when we review funds to invest in, we look at the professional management. We look at their boards to see if they're diverse. We look at to see if the fund managers are women or people of color, because it's astonishingly, it's scary how few, for example, BIPOC or women venture capital partners there are, or private equity partners there are. And then as a result, you may then not be surprised at how horribly low of a percentage of investments, of venture capital investments and private equity investments, go to women founders and BIPOC founders. So part of the change is helping women and BIPOC to be in the room where it happens. I should say at Clean Energy Credit Union, I want to admit, when we started the credit union, we had a predominantly white, predominantly male board. And I'm glad that we realized this and made the change. It took some extra effort to say, hey, wait a minute, we've got predominantly men, predominantly white folks on our board. We need to do something. And it was great that we had multiple white men say, I'm willing to step down in order to make space for BIPOC and women to join our board. And we went through that process 2 years ago, and I'm happy to say it helped to diversify our board, which is very important for what we're doing, because Clean Energy Credit Union, very we did not take deliberate action to do this, but we are what's called a low income designated credit union, which means that more than half of our members are low income. It just turned out that way, that low income folks were saying, hey, I want to do green home improvements. I want to buy electric cars. I want to put solar panels on my roof because it's going to help me to save money in my electric bills. It's great that that worked out. But what we need to transition towards is making proactive effort to reach low to moderate income LMI target markets, and also need to reach BIPOC markets or members, saying, here are these fantastic clean energy and energy saving loans at wonderful rates, the best in the country. We need to reach out to proactively reach out to those audiences to help make sure that they're included in this. So we are designing programs right now that are going to provide rate discounts to low to moderate income borrowers and to BIPOC borrowers for our loans. And starting to, we don't have it all figured out yet, but starting to figure out what's a way that we can be proactively inclusive in designing loan programs like that. So those are just some examples.
Super powerful insights. I think, it's important to remember half of this country doesn't make any investments at all. And that's going to be changing as we continue to address income inequality. So I like to wonder, what will those investments be, right? Will they be in the stock market, or will they be in some sort of alternative asset class? We're really jazzed on regulation crowdfunding because for the first time in 100 years, people can actually directly invest in small private companies in a general way. So it may be that half of these people never even invest in the stock market and only invest in projects from, amicus members that crowdfund their investments. I mean, we don't have to be limited to the paradigm of relying solely on public equities to drive our economy into climate finance. So when we think about accessibility, for us, that means you can actually invest in a solar project, which, to my knowledge, there's really no way for a non-accredited investor to do that in the US besides on platform like ours. So direct access to these investments. I mean, if you're an accredited investor, you can throw 20K here, 20K there and invest in solar projects, but $100, $1,000, that's not an option. So that's how we think about accessibility.
Yeah, this is such an important and hard question. I mean, I think one thing we'll call out is look, we're three white guys who are here on this panel. And so just looking at that. And I think that so much, we're early in our journey. And it's just something that's it's a really hard tension of how do you, I'll just speak as an early stage founder, is you have your network, which my network is not as diversified as the entire US population. I wish it was, it's just not. And so I'm also trying to move really fast and build a lot quickly. And so having people that I trust and already know could be really helpful in that. And that's part of this problem that Blake, you were talking about, of it's a top of the funnel problem for bringing people up and through of who works at these companies, who gets trained in these industries, who then goes off to go build their own thing. That's the next big thing. And so I think that's where we really try and spend our attention of how are we making sure in our hiring processes that we're really focusing on that top of the funnel and who we're bringing into this, because they're going to stand on our shoulders to build what is going to be even bigger and better and more impactful.
Yeah. Just to add on a little bit here, I mean, look, a lot of it is knowledge equity, right? How do you create an operating agreement? How do you do an offering memorandum? There's a lot of barriers. If you don't come, if your dad didn't golf with this guy, you might not get in Goldman internship, and then you won't be able to, so this is real. And so a lot of the work that we've done over the last few years is basically developing all the documents that people need to actually say, here's a PPA, here's an operating agreement, here's the financial model, create your own green job. Because, before Uber, millions of people didn't realize they wanted to be taxi drivers, right? Now you have a million pissed off Uber drivers that probably are looking for something different. So could we, could these people create solar projects, do their own development of energy efficiency, and really kind of become local heroes, creating resilience in their communities and have people invest in it? I think yes. I think there are thousands of people, if not tens of thousands, that would do something like that, that would create their own job. But they need to actually have the knowledge equity to do that. And it still is a massive challenge, but open sourcing document template sets and financial models is a really good start. And, we encourage everyone to kind of do things like that and make that proprietary aspect of a lot of stuff more accessible and public.
I think all of those are really interesting insights into how we start to crack away at this problem. And I'm really hopeful for change going forward in this new industry and the capacity it has to kind of rebuild how our systems are set up and who profits and is able to access it. So we only have a few minutes left, so I want to start diving into a few of the audience questions. So the first one we got emailed in is, how do carbon offsets fit into this equation? So how do carbon offsets fit into understanding, the climate impact of your finances? What's your opinion on that?
Happy to take a first crack at this.
Yeah, Zach, you got carbon in your name, man.
Exactly. Yeah, it's another space that we looked at pretty closely. The carbon offsets industry is young. It's improving. It has a lot of problems, and there's also a lot of really good work that is happening in it. It's just like most things in the world, it's complicated. I think a problem with carbon offsets is if you use it, that's all you do. Carbon offsets can be additional to the other work that you are doing as an individual in your life, in moving them. So should you offset any emissions from your portfolio? Sure. Should you use an app like Joro and connect it to your bank? Like, that's awesome. You should also pay attention to where you're banking, where you're investing, what type of car you're driving, solar, all of that as well. And then kind of add on the carbon offset piece. It's my 2 cents.
Yeah, and there's other types of offsets too. I mean, many solar projects wouldn't exist without renewable energy credits, which are kind of like a type of indirect carbon credit. But really, carbon credits are basically saying, hey, I will give you money for free to do this because I feel guilty, basically. And we can, there's people pioneering other types of credits, like social impact credits. So like, would you pay, you pay $10 a ton for carbon? Would you pay, $10 a month to have a BIPOC CEO to pay them more so they can quit their job while their company's scaling? So I think you'll see a surge of these types of alternative credits to allow people to tailor the impact they want just beyond carbon credits.
So another question we had come in was, what other financial products do you see coming up in this space? And just from GreenPortfolio's perspective, here are some things we're looking for. We would love to see a good credit card in this space. We're really excited, hoping to soon see some good insurance products in this space. So far, not quite there yet, but I think we'll see that soon. Mortgages, I think, are also on the docket. What are you guys seeing, hearing, working on? We'd love to hear.
I think I'm going to err on the side of stating the obvious, that yes, you could invest in someone else's solar project or in a company that does solar and all these things, but you can also put solar panels on your own roof if you haven't done that yet, or you can put insulation in your attic if you haven't done that yet, or to make your home more energy efficient. The number of electric vehicle options that are about to come out. I know the number of options is relatively limited right now. You might only have a dozen to choose from, but soon every major auto manufacturer is going to have a full lineup of electric vehicle options to look at. And so if you're thinking about getting a new car sometime soon and the options that are currently available aren't the best ones for you yet, just hold on another year or two, because there are going to be a ton more. And that is a great way to, and that is an investment, right? Investing in your own car. And electric vehicles, when you think about how much you're going to save on fuel, you're not using you're not using gasoline. Hopefully you'll be using renewable energy to charge the car, but also it has like 1/10 the number of moving parts, requires a lot less maintenance. So it's a fantastic investment with a fantastic ROI, I think. So I just wanted to state that there's so many of those types of products for your own usage that I think can be considered investments too.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'll give a shout out to like green crowdfunded private equity and green crowdfunded private debt, which is an emerging asset class that you can find on Raise Green. I mean, I would challenge the business owners here and just let them know, like, any type of security that you want to design, we can issue with our license. So I think there's a lot of room for experimentation by business owners in terms of the types of financial products they want to create. That is possible. So that's what I have to say on new products coming in.
There's like crypto is big right now. I'm really not holding my breath in this space, but there's also just like a ton of creativity. There's so many smart people that are coming into climate right now. And so it's almost like all I know is that like, I don't fully know what it's going to be. And I'm really excited to see.
There are some comments in the chat about, I guess I would put those like the circular economy. We are seeing a lot more funds. They're all private. So kind of talking what Matthew was talking about earlier, where usually you have to be an accredited investor to participate, which is a bummer because it's exclusive to a certain group of folks. But it is exciting to see the number of companies and funds that are focusing on the circular economy. So trying to find alternative to plastics, trying to take things that we used to think of as waste, but reuse them for something else. There is a growing number of those, both in terms of private company investment opportunities as well as funds. But admittedly, it's a bit exclusive because you have to be able to participate in those private offerings.
So I hate to bring our discussion to an end. It's been really great having all of you here, but we're at the end of our hour. So to continue to learn about climate finance and how your financial decisions and money have the power to fight climate change, you can follow GreenPortfolio, E2, Raise Green, Carbon Collective, Clean Energy Credit Union. All of us are on all the social media channels, and we all also have websites, which I think we'll throw up in the chat in a moment. I'd also really like to thank Uchenna and E2 for co-hosting with us. Just to give them an additional plug, they are an affiliate of the National Resources Defense Council, the NRDC, and they have a mission to work with business leaders to promote policies that are good for the economy and the environment. So a mission I think all of us on the panel really agree with. And they're doing the really hard work of advocating for needed policy changes at the state, regional, and federal level. So I think the work they do will be really, really pivotal in continuing to push climate finance forward and making the difference for climate change in general in the United States. We'd also like to invite everyone attending to join our waitlist. If you're interested in the next iteration of GreenPortfolio, we're building a personal finance platform to help you manage your money the climate-friendly way. So we want to make it easy for you to understand the climate impact of your finances and also meet your financial goals. You can learn more at www.greenportfolio.com/waitlist. Thank you all so much for being here today. We appreciate your time and hope you enjoyed the discussion.
Thanks, Bonnie.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.